There are family feuds, and then there are family feuds that somehow refuse to retire from the public stage. And the latest episode in the long-running Markle saga arrived in the most unexpected fashion. Not with a dramatic argument, not with a fiery debate, but with a simple, unmistakable sound. Click. One radio host, one interview, and suddenly Samantha Markle found herself quite literally cut off mid-performance. Now, if you've been following the twists and turns surrounding Meghan Markle for any length of time, you'll recognize the rhythm of this story almost instantly. The pattern is familiar. A new interview surfaces, a microphone appears somewhere in the media landscape, and another round of accusations or grievances begins circulating. Each time, the tone is strikingly similar. A declaration of telling the truth, followed by criticism aimed squarely at Meghan, and a portrait of the speaker as the overlooked victim of a royal-era transformation. But this particular interview unfolded differently, and that's what makes it oddly fascinating. The radio host, rather than letting the conversation drift into another extended monologue of claims and counterclaims, simply stopped the show in its tracks. No polite winding down, no diplomatic transition to the next topic, just the abrupt end of the line. And judging by the internet's reaction, quite a few listeners were less shocked than relieved. Here on the Crown Talk UK, we tend to step back and ask the slightly uncomfortable questions behind moments like this. Not just what was said, but why the public reaction feels the way it does. Because by now, many observers have noticed something curious about the Markle family drama. Every new interview seems to reopen the same chapter without ever really moving the story forward. And there's another detail that often resurfaces whenever Samantha Markle re-enters the conversation. Long before Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry placed the Markle name under a global spotlight, Samantha was known publicly by different names, including Yvonne Grant and later Samantha Rasmussen. Yet as Meghan's life shifted dramatically into royal territory, the Markle name returned to center stage. For some observers, that timing raised a few eyebrows. Of course, motivations in family disputes are rarely simple. Some people genuinely believe Samantha feels deeply hurt and sidelined by her sister's rise to international fame. Others take a far more cynical view, suggesting that proximity to global celebrity can become a form of currency in its own right. In the modern media economy, attention has value. Headlines generate interviews, interviews generate more headlines, and before long, the cycle becomes self-sustaining. That's why the radio moment landed with such curious force. Instead of extending the spotlight, the host simply switched it off. And sometimes that silence can speak louder than any rebuttal. If you find these behind-the-scenes dynamics as fascinating as I do, by the way, consider subscribing to the Crown Talk UK. We spend a lot of time unpacking the quieter signals that often get lost beneath the headlines. The internet, predictably, had a field day. Some listeners laughed at the sheer awkwardness of the abrupt hang-up. Others argued it was exactly the right response when interviews begin drifting into recycled grievances. But the moment also reminded people of earlier episodes in this saga, including the time Samantha reportedly traveled to the gates of Kensington Palace, hoping to deliver a letter to Meghan and Harry in person. Moments like that have gradually shifted public perception of the feud. What might once have seemed like a painful but ordinary family disagreement has, over time, taken on the atmosphere of a recurring spectacle. And like any long-running spectacle, audiences eventually begin asking a different question, not who's right or wrong, but why the show keeps returning. Which brings us back to that quiet little click at the end of the radio line. No dramatic finale, no final word, just silence. And sometimes, in the strange theater of celebrity conflict, silence is the clearest signal that the audience may finally be ready to move on.